SpaceMobile podcast.
We just basically promise the phone be seamless, regardless of where you are. We don't want the user even to know that it's connected by satellite. Listen, the opportunity that we have is very, very, very large.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining and good morning for another Wake and Bake. I actually like these formats because they're short. Oftentimes, if I don't have a time limit, then I just keep rambling. But having these quick updates on a daily basis or almost daily basis feels like the right type of format, at least for now. Where it seems like, especially as we have Catalyst season for ASTS, it seems like having this type of format actually works quite well. But anyway, I did want to talk about some news that hit this morning. We officially are now launching Bluebird 7 aboard New Glenn 3, Blue Origin New Glenn 3, which has been confirmed, and it looks like a more firm date will be set, but it's looking like the end of February, which is great. And so I was just thinking about the timeline and how there's probably a pretty decent chance that Artemis is going to launch probably in the second half of February as well. And so we might be lucky as ASD SpaceMobile shareholders to, if Artemis goes up and then Blue Origin goes up within a 2, 3, 4 day time frame, you might be able to see both, which is pretty amazing. And so seeing our first mission to the moon, where I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I might be wrong on this, but I think we're sending some astronauts to go orbit the moon and come back. And then, of course, the mission after that will be landing on the moon. But you'll have that on board, and then you've got New Glenn, which is Blue Origin's, pride and joy, attempting its third launch, and it will be taking a special payload, which is Bluebird 7. As we all know, Bluebird 6, which is FM1, and Bluebird 7, which is FM2, are SDA Halo satellites, and so it makes sense that New Glenn take up this satellite in particular, just given that New Glenn is, or Blue Origin is trying to get certified for Department of Defense work, and this will be their third successful launch. They need to do one more in order to meet the 4 launches for requirement. So this is a huge event because you have a new launch vehicle. There's going to be a lot of fanfare, and you've got our new satellite going up as well. And so the company did mention that there will be a process. As previously with the Block 1 launch, there probably will be a sign up and then they'll select a few people. I'm not sure how that works, if it's a lottery or if they actually dig in and select who's coming. But for Block 1 launch, they pretty much, it took several rounds, but they pretty much invited everybody who applied. I don't know of anybody who applied who didn't get an invite, but then I think for this launch, it will be a bit rationed. There's probably, my guess is that there'll probably be half the people from ASD SpaceMobile there. And the reason why that is that for Block 1, we were aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9, and because it's a very typical event for SpaceX folks, not many people show up from SpaceX. Whereas for this event, I would expect a tremendous number of Blue Origin guests, whether that's folks from the company or Department of Defense officials, government officials. So I think it's probably, my guess would be maybe a third Blue Origin folks and 2/3 SpaceMob, or it could be half-half. So we'll see. But as a reminder, though, you don't need to go, you don't need to be part of the formal event and have a seat at the viewing area. You can go to anywhere in the Cape and you'll be able to see the rocket launch because it's visible for several miles. And so I'd encourage people, if you do have the time, there's nothing quite like it to see a launch, especially something where you're so heavily invested. It's a weird mix or a fun mix of excitement, joy, anxiety, and a number of other things. But this launch will be a pretty awesome event, and I'm looking forward to it. Oh, looks like. All right. Sorry, I had to turn off a message that I was getting. But I do want to put a shout out to SpaceMob. I think this is just another demonstration of the unparalleled due diligence that we have in the community. And so, as early as I think it was early fourth quarter last year, based off of a number of different work that people were doing, we started to speculate that FM2 was going to go aboard Blue Origin New Glenn 3. And so, our confidence factor went up over the next few weeks, and obviously by the end of last year, we were almost 100% confident that was going to be New Glenn. And so, it's great to see that our due diligence paid off, and that satellite is going aboard New Glenn 3. And so, I would say if you're an investor in AST SpaceMobile, it's important to become part of the community and be active, because there's a tremendous amount of information and wealth of knowledge, whether that comes from Katsi or Kook or Tut or Kevin Chen, Tanner, Red Rum. I mean, there's a whole host of people. Actually, I was thinking maybe I'll put out a list of accounts to follow, which is not going to do it justice, but I think for new investors, it probably helps to have a list of various people to follow if you want to stay plugged in. But the reason why I mentioned this is that even as of yesterday, we had, which I think was partially AI slop driven, but you had this scare around Blue Origin Tera Wave, where maybe some headlines got picked up, and then the stock started selling off. I mean, obviously the space sector was off, but then the stock started becoming very, very heavy on concerns that somehow this Blue Origin Tera Wave was going to be competitive with AST, which it clearly isn't. For those that don't know, Blue Origin announced that they are going to put up a constellation called Tera Wave, and it's going to be focused on high-end enterprise and data center and government customers. And so this is, really high throughput satellites that are going to be in low Earth orbit and medium Earth orbit. And we're talking about symmetrical download and upload speed. So symmetrical meaning exactly the same for their RF, which radio frequency, which they're using Q and V band. That's going to be 144 gigabits per second. And then for their optical links, that will be 6 terabits, which is pretty crazy. So this product is actually positioned at the very high end. It's not, utilizing QV band spectrum or optical. That certainly cannot communicate to mobile phones, nor will it ever. Because QV bands, you need exact direct line of sight and high power to make that connection. And so it's not anywhere close to, cellular spectrum or MSS spectrum. And then of course, optical, I don't foresee anyone using optical links from your phone to a satellite. That would be pretty crazy too. I think Mega Constellation wrote about this announcement yesterday, saying that the way that these satellites are going to be architected and what they're claiming, at most you're going to each satellite will only serve maybe a handful of customers at a time, because that's a tremendous amount of throughput. And so what I think this, and Katsi started, coming onto this pretty early, because Katsi's Katsi, given that there will only be a handful of customers that connect to these satellites at any time, and that the satellite can communicate to a customer via QV band, which happens to be the exact bands we're using on our satellites, and our antenna can actually that stick out from the satellite that communicate with the ground stations. They can actually point back up into space, and so there is some speculation that as part of Golden Dome, maybe perhaps Tera Wave, it will become kind of the backbone data layer. And then our satellites, whether it's the dual use case, composite satellites, or perhaps more specialized government satellites, they will interface with Tera Wave, and then obviously do their job on the defense application. So whether that's radar sensing to pick up missile launches or detection, or also, following those missiles, but also, doing PNT, position, navigation, timing. And then of course, the ability to do electronic warfare, whether that's spoofing, jamming, all those things. And then of course, providing communications to warfighters on the ground, drones, and other assets. So that speculation, Katzy kind of put out there yesterday. And as I've mentioned before, never fade Katzy's due diligence because he's oftentimes right in, drawing lines between the dots and putting the puzzle pieces together. And so I thought that was a very interesting call out by him. And I encourage people to read his post about it. But yeah, I think to me, when that news came out and they were talking about using optical links and QV band for feeder and, sorry, not for feeder, but for uplink and downlink, that really stood out to me because that doesn't, you're looking at customers on the ground needing a very strong antenna, one that can move to track the satellite for QV band. And so that seemed like a pretty odd spectrum to use. However, if it's providing backbone connectivity to other satellites, that makes actually a ton of sense. So yeah, I encourage people to take a look and read Katzy's speculation on that. The other thing I will say, I was looking at the charts that I had laid out, I think it was in December, about how AST had been following, and I'm not a chart person, but AST had been following this like 1, 2, 3 impulse pattern where it would spike up, it would come back a little bit, and then it would spike even higher, then come back a little bit, spike back up at a little lower level, and then it would cool off. And so we had seen this like maybe 4 times before, which is pretty interesting that it was following this pattern. However, this current pattern has completely obliterated that, right? And so just taking a look here, if you look at the chart, we've already hit like three impulse, I guess impulse moved up but we keep moving higher, right? And so each one is bigger than the previous one. And so I'd mentioned this before, but I think because we're in this interesting period where we now are tasked with pursuing business for Golden Dome, so that changes the entire story of the company, especially for people that are unfamiliar with it. And then on top of that, you've got now what previously was, one launch, and then you'd kind of have to wait for a few months or a year for the next launch. Now we're in this sweet spot where we're having launches every month and a half, right? And so I think that pattern that we had seen before is pretty much going to be, or is broken. And I talked about this yesterday, where I think the setup is pretty bullish for the rest of the next few months, because we are now heading into this period where, as some of you saw, Elon Musk is now targeting for SpaceX to go public by July of this year. And so as people, as institutional investors do their work and get smart around space ahead of that IPO, because no one is going to participate in that IPO without having some level of research and understanding the sector and competitive dynamics and who the players are. That's going to bring a whole swath of new investors and interest into space. And of course, you're going to have speculators too, who, the playbook is like you own the sector when the marquee company goes public, right? Because everything kind of appreciates, just given that there's more interest and more investment dollars going into the sector. And so we've got this interesting mix where for AST SpaceMobile, we're on this path of commercial launch. We've got, there's some people who've asked, what does this mean that batch 1 and batch 2, there's three Bluebirds that will go up on a Falcon 9 launch, and then shortly after that, another batch. I think there's actually a good chance that we might see one of those batches get shipped down to the Cape and get launched maybe simultaneously or pretty close to Blue Origin New Glenn, but we'll see. But at least I think in this, I guess in this coming week, or perhaps as late as next week, we'll probably see one of those batches of 3 shipped down to the Cape. And I'd mentioned this before. SpaceX has a bit of a backup because I think there's only like one pad that's running right now, and so there's been a bit of a traffic jam to integrate new payloads into fairings, and so there is a little bit of a delay there. But after New Glenn launches, I would expect that the first batch of 3 on SpaceX Falcon 9 will probably go up shortly after, maybe a week or two after. And then after that, you'll have another one, right? Where I think we're probably going to be cutting it close for the company's target of 5 orbital launches by the end of March. Now we're with this Blue Origin New Glenn, that's 2. And then you probably have another batch of 2 coming shortly thereafter. And so will they be able to get that 5th one in just prior to March end or sometime shortly after? We'll see. But as we've always talked about, a few weeks here and there, a few months here and there is not a big deal because it's inevitable, right? When we talk about ASTS SpaceMobile and service rollout, it's all a matter of time, and it's inevitable. And so thinking about the dynamics of trading in the stock and the catalysts that are coming up, heading into SpaceX $1.5 trillion IPO in July, I think it's setting up very well, right? You might have this perfect storm of ingredients where the company is going to be catapulting these satellites up into space. And so if you're short, that's bad, right? Because you've got ongoing catalysts, whether the company starts getting some Golden Dome awards through Shield, or as we speculated, and again, don't fade SpaceMob, but we speculated that they will get an award via Noble as well, which is part of Golden Dome. And so you've got a number of different catalysts that are happening on top of the fact that interest in space is heating up. And so I do think there is this chance, and I put on some risk yesterday to express this with the pullback in the stock, but I think there's a good chance that the stock price performs heading into July, much better than any of us expected or could imagine, right? And so, I talked about the end of the year possibly being, I think it was like $200 or $300. That could happen sooner than we expect, right? Because of, again, those ingredients that go into the company's catalyst, and then you've got that IPO for SpaceX coming up, right? And so I think there is going to be a lot of interest and a ton of articles written. I've hinted at this before, but one of the largest financial publications is currently writing a story about SpaceMob in particular and ASTS SpaceMobile. And so this type of stuff is going to, this news is going to draw more attention and increase awareness. And I have a fun story. I bought a bit of real estate here in New York recently, and I had closing, I guess it was 2 days ago. And the buying attorney, who I've known for a really long time, but I haven't seen him in years, he showed up. And then, of course, the seller attorney showed up. The seller didn't show up because they had their attorney to execute the deal via power of attorney. But anyway, I was wearing my SpaceMob jacket, and then these 2 gentlemen who are older than me asked about it. And then, I spent about 5 minutes talking about ASTS SpaceMobile, and it was weird. Like, they immediately understood it. They totally got it. And one of them actually had T-Mobile and said, "Hey, that we've had this satellite service, but it's terrible." And so when I explained to him what ASTS SpaceMobile is and how it's working with AT&T and Verizon, how it'll be seamless in its broadband, this gentleman spends quite a bit of time out in Long Island, and he's actually moving to Austin. And so, yeah, they both were like asking me what the ticker was, and I'm pretty sure like they probably ended up buying shares this week. So yeah, it's just kind of funny. Like you tell people about I didn't discuss the defense use case at all. I just talked to the commercial side, and immediately they understood and were interested in buying shares. And so yeah, I think that dynamic is going to be there for this what we'll call the endless rally for the months leading into summer. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And I think yesterday I rarely do this, but I shared like the fact that I bought 5,000 shares when the stock dipped to 198 or 98 or so. I think I bought some shares at 101, and then I bought the rest at 98. And then I put on 250 of these July. I mean, this is highly speculative, and whenever you do options, just assume that you've written them off to zero. But I bought 150 180 call spreads. And so those were, I think I paid like $3.80 to as high as $4.20. But that's for a spread that's $30, right? And so if by expiry, the stock goes above 180 or so, you have the maximum profit potential of $30 X, and then you got to take out, what you paid, which is $3 to $4. But yeah, over the next few months, like I'm probably going to look to add risk as we pull back. Obviously the company is very volatile, and if you have AI headlines or people pushing whatever narratives, the stock, or the stock just trades with the sector, you'll have opportunities to, for me, I have a core holding that I never touch, but then there is a certain amount of capital that I set aside, and I do more speculative trading, because just given how volatile AST is, and to keep myself entertained, I do some of these trades. So anyway, but yeah, that's what I did yesterday. But I do think, as I said before, I do think we're setting up for a really great summer, and the months leading into that are going to be tremendous. And so the key thing, of course, is for the company to execute. It was disclosed recently in an FCC filing that the company is now at a production cadence of 6 satellites per month. And so, yeah, we are going to have actually, let me take a look here. When it's expected that we'll have a Q4 call. So we are going to have a Q4 call, probably, at least Bloomberg's predicting early March. So March 3rd. Let me just see what it was last year. Yeah, so last year it was March 3rd as well. And so that will be a great earnings update, because, obviously by then we probably will have 1 or 2 batches of 3 satellites shipped down to the Cape for launch. And then by that time as well, we'll have had Blue Origin take up BB7. And so that earnings call will be jam-packed with information, probably discuss things around Golden Dome and also probably by that time, my guess is we'll probably have another definitive agreement with the customer. So yeah, definitely looking forward to that. Anyway, I'm going to wrap up that part of this morning, which is AST SpaceMobile. I've asked Redrum to, if he can, to put these into the podcast. So that first section is done. That's AST, and we'll catch up again soon. I'm going to move over very quickly to T1 Energy. So if you're not interested, you can drop off now.
Thanks for listening to the AST SpaceMobile podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest news about AST SpaceMobile, make sure to subscribe. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.
We're doing something very, very big. And I think with this technology, we can really affect billion lives.
AST SpaceMobile is the only company that has proven technology to deliver cellular broadband connectivity directly from space to your everyday smartphone.
People will just basically turn their phone and be seamless, regardless of where you are. We don't want the user even to know that it's connected by satellite. Our role is to bring this into reality, always in partnership with the MNOs.